You're listening to WEEI Late Night
on WEEI.
And streaming everywhere on the Odyssey app.
I'm a Patriot fan, big time, first. And more than anything, it bothers me that we haven't been able to win a playoff game in the last 3 years. And I'm happy that I think we had a great draft last year and it made up for what happened the previous 4 years or so. And I look forward to hopefully having a great draft this year. That's the only way you can build your team for long term and consistently that you have a chance of winning is having a good draft.
That's Robert Kraft, owner of the Patriots. I guess around deliveries, delivery times, because that's a delivery truck for your behind them. It's KJ Late Night here on WEEI 617-779-7937. The text line 37937. Kraft says, I am a Patriots fan. And if you look at the landscape of the ownership across the league, you would say like Kraft, Jerry Jones. I don't even really put Arthur Blank on that level. I think he just kind of like to show up. But like, this is what these guys are like. This is like the main portion of their identity, right? This is what there's always Bob Kraft. If you're going back to the Boston Lobsters, the tennis team, if you're of a certain age, having sports in greater New England has always been part of Bob Kraft's DNA. And so to say I'm frustrated for not winning a playoff game in the last 3 years, you almost have to say, hey, Bill, there's some semester grades that come out so far. Midterms are out on your plan. So for those who thought I was crazy thinking that, hey, Bill may be developing an exit strategy, I think just those comments right there from Robert Kraft is putting Bill Belichick on notice. I'm not happy with the last 3 years. And what happened 3 years ago? I know, don't say it out loud. Don't say it out loud. But yes, remember, it was Kraft who went to bat for Tommy Boy and say, okay, send Jimmy G off. We're sticking with Tom. I can perceive that Bill said, okay, I did it your way. The way I want to move is I don't see $25 million in value in the player. Do you know how? I just have to say this for a second. Do you know how sexy Tom Brady's contract looks now in comparison to when it was too much money?
Well, I'm rooting for Tom Brady.
Of course. And he's probably salivating over that salary. If you were listening last night, I mean, Jonnu Smith's dead cap number is about the same amount that Brady's salary is. This isn't boding well. And something has to be done. Now, I like the signing of Jabril Peppers here, even though he's coming off of an injury. Sometimes you just need that year and a half to rehab and get yourself back together. And if you're going to go older, I would rather see that you're going to have multitudes of guys back there so that way you don't have the huff and puff situation that you saw in that Bills playoff game where, man, we tried everything and nothing worked. It's like, well, maybe you're tired. And so I believe that was a nice small lob to let Belichick know that, hey, I've been behind you all these years. We've done some great things. But as that Smith song says, how soon is now? So Mr. Kraft talked more about like the approach to the offseason. Here are his comments.
Well, I think we have a lot of young players that are coming into their own. I don't think free agency is over. I know the big spending we use. Remember, we have a salary cap. So there's only so much we can do in that area. I do think that we have an opportunity to pick people up right along the way, right down to the final cuts. That's, to me, when free agency is over, and I've seen it other years, and people get all excited with the headlines now, but in the end, It's what happens throughout the entire year.
Yeah, none of those words was the word draft. Well, there was a good draft last year. But it's time to say, okay, look. Last year, the draft was all about getting a quarterback. And if Bill is going to be the guy that says, I don't see value in the player at $25 million, well, he's got to see it. He's got to make sure he sees value in a rookie quarterback that you can kind of exploit for change for 4.5 years. He found that. That's a good business move. But the idea around that is you spend to put free agents around them. Which, in hindsight, just ask yourself this. This is like a hypothetical question or rhetorical, however you want to look at it. Would you have rather seen Bill not make bad spending moves last year and see a Patriots team, say, go 8-9 last year, but now have plenty of cap room this year to make moves at free agents this year? Okay, Justin, you could be the one that doesn't answer it and make it an unrhetorical question. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Because you'd have to ask yourself, who gets into the playoffs just to lose the first game? Nobody. And it wasn't even close. It wasn't even competitive. It wasn't even how did they get in? I know the Steelers backed in, but they fought their way into the playoffs. I mean, the Patriots moonwalked backwards in. We beat the Jaguars on the way in here. What, you want a medal? So now, and maybe that might be a little of the hint that you're hearing in Bob Kraft's voice that, yeah, I know there's a cap, but free agents. And maybe there's some things that will come out towards the end, final cuts, meaning that he wants a name for the quarterback that you don't have to pay any money for at least a couple of years. Mac does not perceive to be one of those who says, if you don't extend my deal now, I sit. No. That's not. So you don't have that situation there. I will venture to say I do not believe that Mac Jones will be an MVP candidate before his contract as a rookie is up. We're not talking the Lamar Jackson situation here. So maybe, and now I think about it even more, all the spending was pretty much done really for Cam Newton as the quarterback. But I'd said, hey, look, if you're going to bring in a rookie, and let's just call where Cam's skill sets were at that time, that a rookie could surpass him at some point in the season. That's just what my belief always was. But now when you go back, you're like, wow, did you really value Aguilar that high? Really? I mean, I would give you hit on Hunter Henry. That's perfectly fine. He provided the service you needed for a rookie quarterback. Jono Smith, not so much. So now going into this year, while you're coming off of a playoff loss, but still a winning season, and a quarterback that was in the argument for player of the year as a rookie player of the year. So you have some positive things going, but then Josh McDaniels leaves. Here's Robert Kraft's thoughts on the coaching changes.
I think we have it. I think Bill has a unique way of doing things. It's worked out pretty well up to now. So I know what I don't know, and I try to stay out of the way of things I don't know. I think he's pretty good. I don't know, is it over 40 years of experience doing it? So it doesn't sometimes look straight line to our fans or to myself, but I'm results oriented.
Uh-oh. A weird, a unique way of doing things Bill has.
I'm results oriented.
Yeah, I'm results oriented. See, so here's the other side of it. Robert Kraft is a businessman. And when you're a businessman and the word fortune and a number is put next to it, whether it's 100, 500, 200, I don't know where that number is. But they will always tell you that business is about innovation and moving forward. He just talked about Bill's last 40 years. This is not a soda or your favorite brand of potato chips. It's football, and it evolves. He says, hey, you just heard Kraft say, look, some of the things that he does, it may not make sense to the fans or to me. Robert Kraft, I want to thank you for listening to Late Night here on WEEI. I happen to think it's a pretty good show. Thank you. But yeah, the fans are kind of like scratching their head. They're like, wait a minute. Your offensive guru and probably the most comfortable person who would become the heir apparent to Bill. Even if Bill stayed at the GM, you could say, okay, you could potentially see a working relationship still existing where Bill is GM only and Josh McDaniels is the head coach of the Patriots. Well, Mark Davis went ahead and made that an issue. And so now the coaching staff, it's kind of like, if you were listening last night, some of Bill's comments were like, well, look, we don't really worry about titles. Oh, yeah? What if four different coaches have something different to say about how, I don't know, Mac approaches a play? What do you say? Ignore this coach. This coach is in the room at least 10 minutes more. No. Leadership needs to know whose role is whose and how to conduct it as such. I thought that was very interesting. Bill has a unique way of doing things. Sometimes when you're married, that's called hard-headed. Now, Justin, and I know you're not married. I've been married probably, I think it'd be 13 years this year. 14 years. It'd be 14 years. Wow. Someone to stay with me for 14 years? Jeez. But in marriage, you know that you have to carve out a little bit of hard-headedness for yourself. The way I do it is I pretend like I don't hear something until it's said again. And they know I hear it. And with Bill and Robert Kraft, it's probably kind of like, well, Bill is the GM, and if he wants to bring in his guys who you can't figure out who's the coach and who's coaching what and who's telling who what, that's just going to be his little hard-headedness and a way to kind of control his own domain of things. Phil Perry on Early Edition said something pretty interesting about the Patriots' approach for this coming season. I'm baffled, but here it is.
Patriots could be reconfiguring their offense. In what way? How could they change it? Could they go spread? Do they have the talent to do that? Or is there an advantage where that mitigates a lack of talent when you go spread?
I think for Mac Jones, going in that direction would make some sense. I know there are NFL people that I spoke to that were surprised that they went spread as often as they did, meaning all 5 receivers are out and they're eligible.
Yep.
And that can be really difficult for a young quarterback because you are responsible for a great deal of the protection responsibility, right? You've got to get the ball out quickly because if you don't, odds are you're going to get hit. And so it doesn't happen like that for a lot of rookies. The reason, Tom, that with the personnel that they have wouldn't make a ton of sense to me is that when you think about the spread, you think about guys who can separate, and you think about speed. And I look at the Patriots right now, and they really should be, based on who they're paying, they should be a 2 tight end, downhill, run it behind Trent Brown and Mike Owenu and the 700 pounds of man that you're going to have on that right side of the offensive line and use play action. I would expect that the offense would look a lot like it did last year. If they were making drastic changes with Josh McDaniels gone, that feels like a recipe for some uncomfortable moments.
Yeah. That's going to be a problem, right? Because here's what's kind of interesting about the game of football. Everybody has access to the same film. Even if you're not playing him next year. Hey, I want to see some of Mac Jones' tendencies. I want to see what they do when they get in uncomfortable situations. You're going to show them the same thing? Oh. You know, they say you rub the middle of your forehead because your third eye is either annoyed or you have allergies. I'm sorry. I wish I was lying. But my allergies have been fine. I took Courtney Cox's advice. You remember when the game they played Justin on the Greg Hill show? I'm giving them props before they get it. It's really like an hour in advance. That's like an inside joke right there. But she mentioned this thing called a guisha, where it pushes out your lymphatic system, and I've been using one. I have to give her credit for getting me hip to one of those.
taking on the skincare rituals of one Courtney Cox?
Yes, well, yes. I've heard there's some ancient rituals to stay away from, but the geisha, I don't know how you say geisha. Guasha, Guasha.
I'm not even going to try.
It's Keith and Guasha. It's Guasha and Keith. I'm sorry. But no, I mean, I'm rubbing my head thinking like, wait a minute. More spread? When I think of Mac Jones in the spread, you know what play I think of? The very first play of the second half at home against the Saints in the spread formation. And I remember I was physically at that game. I said to myself, why are you coming out in the spread formation as the first play of the second half when virtually almost the last play of the first half was nearly a pick six? And what happened? A pick six tipped off of Jonnu Smith's hands out of the spread formation. So you're going to tell me that defenses are, with no new receivers, you've missed out on all these guys, that suddenly the spread formation from the Patriots as currently constructed and knowing you're not going to run the ball? Help. Here's more Tommy Curran and Phil Perry talking about what are the Patriots trying to do with this team for this year?
Where the Patriots are in their rebuild. And whether or not we want to call it a rebuild, you and I go back and forth on it. I think they're rebuilding to an elite team, but rebuild is so often.
And that I think is where we've come to an agreement.
Okay.
Is they're rebuilding a championship roster. They're not rebuilding the way the Jaguars rebuilt or the Lions rebuilt. Those teams are not competitive, and they're just trying to get to competitive.
Good gracious. What is in their orange juice? This is a championship team? They're building that we see are currently being constructed. This is going to beat the worst AFC West team. This is going to beat the worst. No.
Can they even win their division?
Who? The Patriots? Are you kidding?
No. That's the thing.
I guess if it was golf, where, the bigger score you have behind the negative, the better you're doing, if that's the case, they're 4 under. 4 under what? 4 under 500. Oh, they must be making the weekend turn. I can't wait to see what they've got, because I don't see this Patriots team going better than 6-11 at this point. Now, I don't know, maybe John the Baptist and his cousin Jesus are going to decide to return to earth, and one is going to be the receiver and the other one is going to be on the offensive line or play middle linebacker. Then I might up it to 11-6. And that's with the Lord Almighty. Only because Steve Belichick is going to try and tell him what to do. Son, my son. Well, our son. I'm sorry. That might have just gone a little too left. But my goodness, I don't know where I'd love to be wrong, but I don't see an inkling of a nail or a hammer that says we're locking this down. Watch out for the Patriots this coming year. Who's saying that? And wanting to keep the same offense of last year? Make it make sense. KJ Late Night, 617-779-7937. The text line, 37937. We'll take your comments, get your calls, talk football. You can talk the Bruins that we talked about earlier on this evening. And still to come, we got the Celtics to talk about and this whole Vax stuff. It's weird how this story is coming out now, but it's making more sense to me as that comes along. That's at 11. But Wrestle Madness is next with The Rock in action. Hang out. It's Late Night on WEEI.